Hello and welcome to another Gotham Sound TV in quarantine. I am very happy to be talking to Andy from Sony. Andy, say hello to everybody.
Hey guys, hey everybody out there. Hope you're all doing well.
Yeah, it's really good to see you. How are you doing? Where are you? First of all, let's start there.
We live about 30 miles up the Hudson River from New York City. So things have changed, but it's all working out okay. We have a basement full of food that we've been trying to work our way through, and on the weekends I actually have to clean the basement. And you can imagine, like everybody, how much stuff is stuffed down there through the years. But that's a good weekend activity.
Yeah, it was unclear how long this would be or what things would be like. So yeah, I imagine I couldn't. I live in a small apartment. I couldn't stock up too much. It was
right.
Yeah, but
Right.
yeah, and so how are things at Sony and Sony is on the East Coast, their headquarters. Is that right?
Well, we have big Sony in San Diego, which is the big consumer group, but actually our office is in Paramus, New Jersey. And many of even our professional cameras, including the new Venice camera, are now handled out of our San Diego office. Arguably even closer to Hollywood and stuff like that. But so we are spread across the country.
And how are people handling that at Sony? This product is still shipping, and engineers
Product
are
is
working
still
at home?
shipping. Japan is having their challenges, but they're still working. I still get emails in the middle of the night and things like that. My alarm on my phone or my schedule went off and said, "You're supposed to come home from NAB tonight." So that's the time it would have been. But we just finished at Sony 4 days of what we would have called NAB training, because every year we introduce a whole lot of new products, obviously not just audio, but lots of video gear and display stuff and what have you. And so we ran a webinar for all of our internal Sony sales force, giving training to everybody on all these new products. And that went on for 4 days, and I got to host that. So that was it's like herding cats, but all the presenters are all around the country, all in their homes. But it was great. It worked out really well.
Yeah. And you personally, how are you getting around? Are you able to get out or
Everything's fine. It's hey, happy Earth Day, everybody.
Yeah, happy Earth Day.
It's beautiful out, and all the buds are starting to pop on the trees and the bushes. I remember coming home from NAB every year and just seeing life start again here. So let's hope. Yeah, but it's everything is okay. Days are very full though. There's no question. People might think that you don't have as much to do, but there's plenty of work to be done. So that's actually good. My daughter, as a matter of fact, came home from college for spring break, and she's a musical theater student. So we have reorganized our kitchen, moved the kitchen table to the side, and now we've got a dance studio in our kitchen, and that's her performance space, which is great.
Oh,
and
that's
she
great.
takes a whole bunch of online classes and just kind of cranking it out, and it's wonderful. The tap dancing occasionally gets a little tough, but it's a small price to pay to have her home, and it's wonderful.
It's been a challenge for students. I mean, it really. I hosted a class last night, and it's been a challenge. I'm glad to hear that she's able to practice.
I got to tell you one little thing she did as soon as they started classes. She takes a class in Shakespeare, so she had to do something. So we have a little outdoor second floor balcony that looks down over where our cars are parked. And she took her laptop and set it up on the hood of her car and pointed it up at her at the balcony. And she did the balcony scene from Romeo and Juliet for her class.
That's really great.
That was great.
I have to ask, and this is not meant to be a cheesy segue. Did she use a Sony microphone or wireless to get the audio into the laptop?
She might have used her earbuds. She might have done it that way. I'm not certain. I'm not certain. She kept us away. She doesn't want us being involved in watching her do all those classes, but she said it all worked out great.
Oh, good,
That's
good.
certain.
I'm glad to hear that.
But I of course had have shot plenty of videos of her and certainly used our wireless, no question.
Good.
Good.
Well, we should talk about products.
Great.
What do you have to show? What would you have shown if we were at NAB? By the way, can I just say the only thing
Yeah.
that reminds me of being at NAB is the lack of sleep. I have not been able to sleep, so I'm sorry if I'm dragging everybody. And
No, you're
welcome
doing
to our
great. You're doing
Facebook
great.
audience. Yeah, so please show us.
Well, sure. So at our booth, we would have shown a very new important product for us, which is just starting to ship now. It's our new slot and receiver. Many of you may not realize that we sell tons of wireless with our shoulder cams for news production, for all those kind of things, and lots of channels all over the world. But the slot in the back of a Sony shoulder cam is a little bit wider than what people in your market, in this market, are used to, which is Unislot. So we decided that in order to become compatible with this world of, location sound, as well as being able to put our wireless into competitors' shoulder cams, we would kind of redesign our slot-in digital wireless so that it was Unislot size and super slot compatible and all that stuff. So that's this new guy. However, if you fit into a Sony shoulder cam, it's a 15-pin connector, and obviously Unislot is a 25-pin connector. So we can ship with either connector and the appropriate escutcheon plates to make sure that they fit and they fill up the holes and they do the whole routine. But maybe just as a quick update for many that don't know, this is a complete true digital series. It's 2 complete channels, true double tuner diversity per channel. So there's actually 4 tuners inside of here. And this is now full FCC frequency spectrum from 14 up through the slivers in 38, 470 up to 615, 616. One of the things that I like that we've added in here, though, is a new mode, because we do have Zigbee remote control to our transmitters. You pair up the transmitter to one to each channel of the receiver, and then at a distance up to 30 feet away, you can call up, the transmitter's menus on the receiver or on the camera or in the bag or whatever. And so we can obviously change all those functions. But if you have, transmitters paired and you want to change frequencies or scan, it's a much easier thing. So what we have added is a new shortcut where if you actually hold down the menu and the set button together, the unit starts doing a scan across the entire FCC legal spectrum. And in about 50 seconds, it will offer up the 2 quietest frequencies that it found, and then prompt you to say, do you want me to send those 2 best frequencies out to both paired transmitters, all in kind of one function.
Andy, let me stop you because the questions are piling up, and I'll keep these questions to the relevant product. So first of all, can you repeat the model number of that receiver, please?
I didn't mention it, but it's a DWR, Digital Wireless Receiver, S03D. S for slot, 03 for third generation, D for dual channel. DWR S03D. And then there's little 15-pin or the 25-pin adapters that you can get. And they'll show up. Those are DWA SLAU1 is the Unislot version, and SLAS one is the Sony 15-pin version.
Andy, can you do me a favor? Can you just tilt your microphone down a little bit, just because I think we're hitting. Yeah, there we go. No, that's perfect.
Good. As long as it doesn't rub up against my quarantine beard.
I think that's what it is. Yeah, tell me about it. My hair is looking ridiculous.
Right.
PXW320K. Can it be used on a PXW320K?
Absolutely. It can be used on any shoulder cam that we introduced, going all the way back to the very second generation of XD-Cam camera. The very first generation really had an analog connector inside, and then with the second camera, which is so many years ago already, that added the digital connector, because that's when we started coming out with our digital wireless.
And then I have a few questions about the pairing process. So is it 1-to-1 pairing?
In pairing in Zigbee, it is one-to-one, but we've made it a very simple process. So, arguably the first thing you do is you make your transmitter discoverable by the receiver. And basically you power on the transmitter while holding down the minus button. It automatically goes in discoverable mode. And then you put it down and you go to your receiver and you power on that channel of the receiver while holding down its minus button. And it'll go out and look for any pairable transmitters. It'll flash it at you when you select it, and then they share a little information together, and then they are paired, and you can power cycle on and off, and they come back paired. And then you do the same thing with the second transmitter and the second channel.
And can you have more than two paired? In other words, let's say those two go in the bag or out of range, or I go between a body pack and a handheld. Can the
Currently,
receiver...
you can't change pairing on the fly. You have to, be there close to it, but or whatever.
Yeah.
Within that 30-foot range, and that does bring up the point that, even off of this guy and the Zigbee, the transmitter can be, in talent up to 30 feet away. If you end up with our studio rack gear or field rack gear that allows for up to 9 Zigbee remote antennas, all on PoE at various distances, and each one covers about a 60-foot diameter circle, and we can, control 82 transmitters all in one shot and all that kind of stuff. So we have that, and that's, arguably usable, very, very usable feature.
Yeah. And it's super slot compatibility with the receiver?
Yes, with the new guy, absolutely. Yeah, and that brings up something else that we were going to show at NAB. Hopefully, we've been working with Aton and their Kantar series, and also with Sound Devices and Scorpio, and they have been working on duplicating our screens on their devices, so they'd be able to control this stuff through their mixers, and then scan and reach out and pair to the transmitters and do all those kind of functions. And I was actually looking forward to seeing that stuff up close in person at NAB, but I'll just have to wait.
Well, you and me both.
Yeah, exactly.
And so SuperSlot would network them together in a way, but if I have multiple receivers and I want to make a coordination, are individual receivers aware of what the others in the group are doing, or?
They certainly are in our rack equipment, not necessarily yet in this stuff. So, for example, I've been, toying with the idea of having, 4 of these in an audio limited A10 rack, and that would give 8 channels of true double tuner diversity channels in a single rack space with Dante and all that other stuff. I think that's a pretty compelling, argument for real estate, certainly. But those further enhancements that you're talking about and those kind of coordinations are not yet there. But in our rack gear, you've always had the ability of interfacing them all together so that they're aware of one another, and we don't even have to use our standalone software anymore. You can tell one of the receiver channels just to go ahead and do a scan and assign the best frequencies to all of its other channels in the system. As well, you can also, in that rack studio piece, you can do automatic frequency substitution. So you can dedicate one of the channels in a 2-channel receiver to just sit there and scan all day long. And should any other channel in its network, local network, have an issue, it'll do frequency substitution. That new receiver will get the new frequency and then send out its new frequency to its Zigbee paired transmitter. And then that scanning, channel will happily go back to keep scanning for any future problems that may arise.
Got it. And let's say we go with I like that idea of putting it in the A10 rack. So you would sort of scan the old-fashioned way. Then you'd leave your 2 transmitters on when you go to scan on the second receiver. So that way.
Well, you don't have to anymore, because this can scan and find the 2 quietest frequencies, and it actually sleeps the transmitter while it's scanning.
But in other words, if I have 4 in a rack, and So I have the first one I scan. It finds the two quietest
Yep.
ones. I have to leave
Leave them
those
on.
two transmitters on,
Yes.
and then just go down
And then,
the line.
absolutely.
It's funny to think
Absolutely.
of that as old-fashioned, but anyways,
Right, right, exactly.
But all
Right.
right, that's good.
That's pretty funny. But in terms of integration with these other, mixer recorders, I'm not quite certain yet how that all plays out. Good questions, though.
Yeah. Certainly, a host could keep track of the frequencies and take into account what it's assigned.
Yeah. I would say another thing about this series and the new stuff. We have new small micro body pack, and that's also full frequency range, all FCC legal frequencies, as well as and that's rechargeable batteries with a kind of Sony CyberShot camera batteries, and then this guy is AA batteries, same bandwidth and all that kind of stuff. But we offer multiple codec choices, so you can call up one of 4 different codecs. And they all have, subtly different sound, but really subtle. And level codec 3 offers an extra layer of error correction, and it was, originally primarily used for getting an extra roughly 20 to 30% distance through that layer of error correction. But it also really helps prevent walkie-talkie noise on set from getting in, because it prevents burst errors and things like that. So that is a nice little side benefit to that as well.
And is there a cost in terms of latency or?
Well, the latency on layer 3 is 4.5 milliseconds. On codec 2, we're down now to 1.2 milliseconds latency, which is the fastest we've ever been able to do. The codec 1 that we've had out for the last 10 years in this digital wireless DWF series is 3.4 milliseconds. So it all depends on your latency requirements and other factors, obviously.
But 4.5 milliseconds for the
4.5 milliseconds for the codec 3, I believe.
Yeah, that's fine. Yeah.
Right. Yeah. And we're not talking about a lot of in-ear monitors and round trips through a monitoring console necessarily and all that. So.
Correct.
To a singer on stage, right?
I have, so more of a general question. What's service turnaround? What is service turnaround like for these units?
And then, service turnaround, yeah.
Cool. Chris then follows up with how reliable are the transmitters? I'm going to answer that for you. They're completely reliable, 100% reliable. But what's the service turnaround like?
I will piggyback on your, you think what you just said. Since we've started making wireless literally back in 1960, 61, and every year we've come up with new feature sets and all that stuff, we have very much gone after the broadcast community. And if, it should be obvious that broadcast is mission critical. So the build quality that we, design into these things is really very, very high. This little micro body pack is IPX4 and 5 rated. Every single connector and button and everything is gasketed. And it's magnesium, it's lightweight, it's OLED screens, and we've gone to a little LEMO connector because it's so much smaller, but these things never get warm. They're very nice to work with. And they're obviously true digital. So, you can make the case that from the mic pre into the A to D converter, that's your first A to D conversion. And then we broadcast digitally, and the receiver picks it up digitally and can output it digitally or right into the video file of the camera. And it can go through post-production digitally, and it can get sent to the movie theater or broadcast to the home digitally. And the very first time it goes back into analog is right before the speakers.
That's one of the best things about digital wireless. I feel is
it is
180D conversion.
That's true. And for people that don't work currently with digital, I'm obviously biased, but I've done my own comparisons, and there is a sound difference. So having just a digital boom mic, really, I think, for as much work as boom stuff gets, it really adds to the sound. And by the way, our little plug-ons also do phantom power.
And they're remote controllable.
Et cetera.
And to be fair to Chris's question, he was asking about water resistance.
Service. You're also talking about water resistance and service.
Which you mentioned You mentioned IP65 rated.
IPX4 and 5 rated,
Okay.
and IPX4 and 5 rated. And service-wise, we do just about all of our service on these things in our Paramus, New Jersey office. And the guy that's been doing our Pro Audio service has been doing it for the last 30 years. I've known him since I started with Sony Pro years and years ago. And so he's worked on everything and seen everything. And so turnaround is generally pretty good.
That's good to hear. IPX4 and IPX5, what does that mean in terms of real world?
It means, you don't dunk it into a bucket of water. Let's put it that way. It's not a transmitter for that application, but all perspiration going out in a hurricane, getting rain on it, that's not really an issue.
That is good to know. And the Zigbee is paired, but the RF can be received on multiple receivers. Is that true?
True. There's no one-to-one relationship there. You can have one transmitter and thousands of receivers all.
And it just, by saying the Zigbee's paired, it just means only one receiver can remote control that transmitter, but multiple receivers can get the audio. Got it.
Exactly.
Yeah, I mean, I have to say, just my own personal experience is the sheer the broadband reception that the receivers are capable of, and the frequency increment that receivers can tune to is so fine that it makes coordination a breeze. And of course, the kind of less worry about intermod just in general with digital wireless. Yeah, it really. It was.
That does bring up a point you reminded me of, is that we have added in this latest generation a high density mode with 375 kilohertz spacing, which means that in our world of analog wireless that we have had for years, we can fit 8 channels unevenly spaced within a 6 megahertz TV channel. When you go to digital transmission, previously we've only been able to put in 12 channels evenly spaced with kind of a guarantee of no intermod. And with this high density mode, you can now do 16 channels. No compromise, no loss in quality, no loss in functionality, full quality channels.
What is there a penalty?
Each 6 megahertz. There's no penalty.
The RF output power doesn't get lowered.
No, nothing.
And is it part of this third codec, or is it?
It's not got nothing to do with the codec. It really has to do with the concept that we've increased the sensitivity of the receivers, and so we can have a much tighter reception, and that certainly helps. And it also allows us to cut down on the requirement of how powerful the transmitter has to be. We like to say that the range you used to get out of a 50 milliwatt setting, we can now do out of a 25 milliwatt setting. And that actually also translates into extra battery life. So that's a win-win.
What is the battery life of each transmitter, if you don't mind?
Sure. Well, in the little rechargeable job here, these are the Sony kind of little CyberShot batteries. They're not proprietary. They're not very much money. There are either other aftermarket ones, but we like to suggest you should use the Sony ones. And when you charge those up and put them in here at mid-power, you get 7 hours-ish. And, obviously a little bit less when you crank it up to the max at 25 milliwatts, and a little bit more when you go down to the 2 milliwatt setting. And that's kind of a common range that I think that many of the other manufacturers' transmitters also have in the digital world. In, our AA kind of version of this is now a new one called the DWT-B30, and we have little, AA sleds. It depends on if they're alkaline or lithium and whatever, and you can use Panasonic Eneloops and get, 12 hours, things like that. So we even offer a little rubber door on the side of this guy, which means you can plug in a cell phone charger or a USB connection and power this permanently off of USB.
So if you're using it for a camera hop or something, powering it from a bag or on a podium
exactly.
or something.
Exactly.
So very cool.
Yeah.
And so that closes out the what I would call the highest end range of Sony wireless. Is that right?
Yeah, I would think so. There are, a few other features in there that we don't have to go into full depth on, but I think you get the general concept that, it's...
Chris has a good question about 941. Any models work up there?
We do have 941 currently in our UWP-D series, which we'll talk about in a minute. We don't currently have 941 in the DWX series, but again, this is full FCC white space, kind of range of, again, 470 to 616, I guess you would call it, or 615.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
So,
good to know.
I'm trying to think if there's anything else. I think that's mostly, it sort of does take us briefly into the topic before we talk about UWP-D, if you don't mind. Since we went with a LEMO connector on this little body pack, we actually introduced a new lavalier some time ago, but actually many years ago, we introduced a model called an ECM88, and we've recently introduced it as an ECM90, where it now is properly shielded for use with digital transmitters. But it's a very interesting microphone. First of all, obviously, there were a lot of requests to make lavs even smaller and smaller. And the challenge with making a lav smaller and smaller is that if you hold to the concept that lavs, the capsules are kind of round and their barrel is round, you put traditionally a round diaphragm right in the tip of that capsule. But if you make the capsule so small, the diaphragm gets really small as well. And then you lose frequency response, your inherent noise goes up. And there are trade-offs in doing that. To offset those trade-offs, though, it's a common design challenge. And you try to keep it so large that maybe there's not a lot of diaphragm isolation inside of that round tip and that round capsule. So our Sony engineers said, well, as long as we've got this tiny capsule, I don't know if you can see it here, but you can see little slits on the side, one, and there's an opposite one on the other side. And those are large rectangular diaphragms that go down the side of each side of this capsule. And so they're very large diaphragms. They have a full 20K frequency response, very low internal noise. And I like to say that, you get this much. They're kind of like this, but you get a lot of diaphragm space. But one of the other byproducts of doing this down the side of the capsule omni configuration is we have a lot of space to put in a generous mounting design or a mounting tray for isolating the diaphragm. And I like to say that we get rid of that common problem and we can remove about almost 95% of cable rubbing noise. You can even go up and touch the capsule as long as you don't rub right over the slit. You can barely hear that as well. So that's kind of a unique thing. Interesting. If you guys want to check that out.
Yeah, and that's shipping now.
Oh, that's been shipping for a while. It's called an ECM90. It's available in both a LEMO connector and in what we refer to as our 4-pin kind of, Hiroshi type connector, SAMC.
And is there a hardwired an XLR option for it as well?
There is an XLR option. We figure that if you're using it as an XLR on a news set or something like that, and you want a wired version, we still offer the ECM88 in a non-digital transmission version.
Got it.
However, you can always hook this up to our little inline battery XLR adapter, and obviously you can put this in and you can power these microphones with a AA and so on and so forth. So that's a handy accessory that can be added to many of our microphones as well.
Yeah, and I have to say, this is not Sony specific, but it's good to know you have a battery option because we're getting a lot of people hooking that into an iPhone with a SESCOM adapter, and that makes it super simple.
Exactly.
Great. I was going to say it seems like a good time to move on to the next level, the kind of mid-range wireless. Which I've used personally, and there's a whole bunch of features that I like about it. But can you tell us about that?
Sure. It's got to be almost 12 or 13 years ago that we decided to come out with a line of prepackaged wireless, and it was called UWP, Uhf Wireless package. And we are now on our 4th generation. The last generation, we added a D to the name, UWP-D. And the D stands for Digital Signal Processing, onboard DSP. And so we've just introduced our 4th generation of that version, and of that product line. And we've added a bunch of cool new features. But in a general sense, what is maybe most important is reception quality out of this guy. In this tiny little package, we have true double tuner diversity. So two complete tuners with a little comparator circuit in between that is always saying, is the A tuner better? Is the B tuner better? That's the one I'm going to pay attention to. And it flicks back and forth at its own will, with noiselessly in the whole routine. So reliability of signal with wireless, as all of you people likely all know, is the most important thing. You get burned once by a hit, and you're never quite sure it's not going to happen again. Obviously, you can go so far away. I took the transmitter and the plug-on transmitter a couple of weeks ago down to the end of my driveway, and I set it up transmitting with my phone, playing some music or whatever. And I put my headphones in the receiver, and I walked up the road. And until I got my very first hit, I noticed where I was, and I went back on Google Earth and I measured it out, and it was over 1,200 feet. And it's open air; there's no human bodies in the way, and so on and so forth. But I was kind of, surprised by that. So
yeah,
that was kind of cool.
I can't stop touching my face. I'm sorry. It's really driving me insane. I've been really surprised, happily surprised by its range, and it's got great audio quality. And the thing that really strikes me is there's a lot of people with DSLRs and Sony cameras.
Yes.
The integration with the smart, I don't even know if that's a Sony term for it, but
it's
the smart
shoe.
shoe.
It's a multi-interface shoe.
I prefer smart shoe.
Multi-interface. Exactly.
Right.
So for those of you that may not be familiar, Sony, we're in a bit of a unique situation in the industry where we make obviously both cameras and audio gear. So when the engineers of both those groups get together, they go, what could we do that would kind of be a benefit from the collaboration? And they came up and said, well, if cameras had something which was a much more intelligent shoe, just not a cold shoe, then we could, do all sorts of things. We could route audio, we could send power, we could do various things. So with this little receiver now, we add a little, what's called a multi-interface shoe. And it actually has a little digital or analog switch on it, because even though we had another one of these shoes for our last generation, this is a brand new one. And what it allows you to do is, once you attach this little shoe adapter to the bottom, you take the whole thing and you basically slide it onto the top of your camera. An A7R4 is a perfect example. But, PXW Z280, 190s, all of our cameras just about have these multi-interface shoe connectors, up to, but not quite including our shoulder cams. But things like FS7s, FS5s, FX9s, the new ones, they all have this shoe. And with this new digital capable MI shoe, since these receivers and the transmitters I mentioned have DSP in them, and that is to take care of the companding. And the companding is done through algorithms. It's not built up out of just little electronic components that have various tolerances and may not give you a perfect mirror image of the compression at the transmitter and the expansion at the receiver. We're doing it via algorithms. So it's very, very accurate. But it means that there is an A to D converter at the front of the transmitter and a D to A before we turn it into an FM radio station. It gets picked up by the receiver. It goes through another A to D to get into the digital domain where we can apply the algorithms. And then there's two choices. It can take an analog output and feed into an analog, input on a camera, on a mixer, on a whatever. But we also can pick the signal off before that final D to A. We can pick it off digitally with this MI shoe and go right into our latest cameras, like an A7R4, like an FX9. Those cameras have that ability, even an A9 Mark II, I think. And so that cuts out another D to A and another A to D on the camera side, and even improving the sound quality a little bit more.
And a whole bunch of cables and power worries and all that
exactly.
stuff.
No, audio goes down through the shoe. Thank you for pointing that out. And power comes up from the camera and can power the receiver. And you can just take the batteries right out of the receiver, and that actually saves a little bit of weight.
Yeah, so it's a really slick setup. I used it on a personal project, and it was great. That camera person appreciated it. I appreciated it. One less thing to worry about. They had a Z280 that they were using it with.
Oh, good. So the other thing, though, that we added to this latest generation that is kind of unique, I think, is that we realized that in location sound world, everybody's used to dealing with wireless microphones all the time. They know how to scan, they know how to pair, they know how to do all that. But we also sell a lot of this wireless to people that are not so confident when it comes to that, be it news photogs or wedding videographers or whomever it might be. And so the requirement to scan and always find the quietest channel wherever and whenever you are is prime. And so we have made it even easier. It's hard to see, but there's a little NFC logo right below the display here on the receiver, and there's one right below the display on the transmitter. And what we do is you don't even have to go into a menu. All you do is there's a top panel button on the receiver. You hold it down for about 3 seconds. The unit will start scanning. And when it's finished scanning, the whole OLED display will flash black and white. And then you literally face plant the two together. And it vibrates in your hand. And it's sent the frequency over via NFC. So very easy. But for the world of location sound, we actually did something pretty clever. We allowed the reverse functionality to be true, which is if you've got a pile of these receivers that you're using as a personal monitoring device, because they have their own headphone jacks on them as well as an audio output, you can take 10 receivers and the one transmitter maybe hanging out of your bag or off your cart and go, pick up another one, pick up another one. And all of the receivers are instantly paired up to listen to that one channel.
And with the diversity reception on the receiver, obviously you get really great range and good fidelity.
You get great range, and you can frequency coordinate it with all of the actors, wireless. Plus, this stuff is even available, as I mentioned earlier, in the 941 to 960. So you can completely stay away from those frequencies if you'd like.
That's very cool.
And we've added a menu that puts this into monitoring mode. There's a plus minus button right here on the thing. And when this is on your belt and you have your headphones plugged into it, your finger just reaches down and instantly falls on those plus minus buttons. And that's your headphone volume control that stays active.
Very sweet.
That's kind of a nice little thing. One thing that you had asked me about in a previous visit when we were doing that is you asked how could this be powered if you're hanging this off of your bag or your cart. And we went to an outside manufacturer called Core SWX, and they made this little battery eliminator.
Oh, sweet. They're great. Good. Yeah. Exactly.
And you could get whatever kind of termination you want, but these transmitters are also powerable via USB. So if that's your weapon of power choice, if you can make that happen, that's another option. But so that's a way to keep that going.
Very sweet, Andy. That's great. I feel like we could spend a couple more minutes, but we're getting towards the end.
Yeah, I think so as well.
And we covered a lot of ground.
We did.
So this is good. You and I should talk offline. We should get, if we don't have an ECM90, people are wanting to hear one, and so we should definitely make sure to get them.
Sure.
The antennas are fixed on that wireless. They're not removable antennas. Is that right?
On the UWP-D, they're not, but on the DWX, they certainly are.
Right.
Exactly. Right. Exactly.
Cool. I'm really glad to see that you're healthy and
you too.
It's good to talk to you and. Thank you for taking the time. If anybody has any questions, I'll just keep a quick eye out on the comment section. And I'm just scrolling earlier. I thought I saw one. Yes, does the new URX P40 receiver charge or trickle charge AA nickel metal hydride batteries through the mini USB port?
Great question. We don't do that anymore. We did it on the previous generation. You could put in nickel metal hydride and you could hook up, with the little, the connector, and you could hook it up to a cell phone charger or whatever and charge it that way. Honestly, I don't think we had that many people that did it. So to make this unit even smaller, these are now about 20% smaller than their predecessors. We do allow powering it off of a cell phone charger, but not in-unit charging anymore. Good question.
Yeah, cool.
Yep.
Andy, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Thanks for watching. Thanks for joining us. Be healthy and everybody stay healthy. I think our next thing that we're doing is going to be at 2:00 today.
Yep.
And Andy, it's good to see you. Thank you so
Hey,
much.
I'd be remiss if I didn't ask everybody to remind everybody to think of the Earth today. It's Earth Day, and we still got plenty of problems out there that not enough people have woken up to.
You know,
But,
I have to say the one thing, one silver lining is the air in New York City is really clear. I've been biking every day just to get to work and stuff, and it's yeah. I mean, it's kind of amazing.
Yep, exactly.
So yeah, and yeah, happy Earth Day.
Good.
Thank you. Everybody stay safe out there. We'll see you in a little bit, hopefully.
Thanks, everybody. Bye.